back down and shut your trap. It's time for
Keeping It Sports with M3.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Well, I'll need some beer.
Are you ready?
You have to ask me nicely.
Come on now, don't be bashful.
Are you ready? Are you ready for
Place for the best sports talk and news surrounding each league.
I can prove it with my usual flawless logic.
Hey, man, this time I'm gonna do it my way.
What's your name again?
And now, here's your host, M3, Mike Rosansky. Coming to you from Cherry Hill, New Jersey. It's time for Keeping It Sports with M3, powered by the Knick School of Broadcasting. Good afternoon, everyone. How's everything going today? I am, of course, Mike M3 Rosansky, coming to you here on this Monday, the 30th day and final day of the month of September. Someone out there, please go wake up that guy from the Green Day song. Well, if you know, you know. A lot to talk about today, a lot of things on my mind, a lot of football, of course, throughout the podcast. Give you some thoughts on some interesting things that went down in week 4, whether it be a preseason prediction that I made that I'm feeling pretty good about, a debate that I've had with a certain someone that I know watches or listens to this podcast in recent weeks that brought joy to my heart when it happened yesterday. Mixing some baseball, a big trade that is on the verge of going down in the NBA. Give you some thoughts on that. I want to apologize in advance if I sound a little bit nasally during this podcast today, due to the fact that, as many of you know, I am a diehard New York Jet fan, sometimes to my own detriment. And yesterday was one of those days where not only are they hurting me emotionally watching them, but being at the stadium in the middle of a consistent, messy, rainy day, not doing things for me very well right now. I'm dealing with a little bit of a runny nose. Not sure if I'll have that occasional cough that pops up. So bear with me throughout this. But my current state, how I'm feeling, is not as bad or as disgusting as I feel emotionally about the Jets after watching them yesterday. That was hideous. That was nauseating. That was another one of those examples of that phrase that I wish would die. As a fan, I'm always hoping would die and go away. But that right there was same old Jets. And I've said this a bunch of times over the years, okay? Same old Jets is not the butt fumble. Same old Jets is not getting blown out on prime time by the likes of Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, or throw in whatever elite Hall of Fame level quarterback's name you want there. Same old Jets is them getting our hopes up, feeling that better days are coming, and then they just snatch our hearts away and stomp on it. And that's what yesterday was, because you're riding the momentum after that Thursday night game against the Patriots, where you're the talk everywhere. People saying how great Aaron Rodgers had looked, people talking about how dominant the Jet defense was. And you come into a game against the Denver Broncos, a team that has a rookie quarterback, a team whose rookie quarterback was greatly affected by yesterday's bad weather. In fact, I would argue they were more so affected by the bad weather than the Jets should have been. Because you, at the end of the day, hear that the quarterback only had 60 passing yards. At the end of the day, you hear that your defense allows less than 200 yards total in the game, and you only give up 10 points at home. That should be all the ingredients for a victory. But no, not for the Jets. Not for the Jets, who decided to make things harder on themselves than they really should have been. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it here. I'm not going to lie to any of y'all. Aaron Rodgers by no means was masterful yesterday, was no means that good yesterday. In fact, I thought he dropped back to throw the football way too many times. I'm watching this, wondering, where's the ground game? Why are we not running the football more? Why is it that Aaron is dropping back to throw the football over 50 times and we're only running the ball a little over 20 times? You would have thought that the Jets were getting blown out with the game plan put together, rather than, back one of their strengths, and that has been the offensive line. At least going into yesterday, it had been a strength, but the offensive line was as detrimental as anyone else for this game. I didn't think Tyron Smith played very well. They put the rookie first-round pick in there for Morgan Moses, who was missing action. Everyone on that offensive line at one point or another committed a penalty. And that's what gets me with this Jet team, because I see it over and over throughout the years. That is one of those things that I lump in there with same old Jets. The consistent, dumb, stupid penalties. 13 penalties accepted against the Jets yesterday. 15 total called on them, and 5 of them were pre-snap penalties. And who do you put that at the feet at? The head coach, Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh, who this has been a theme of his coaching tenure with the Jets, where there is constant, boneheaded, dumb penalties being made throughout games, and he never cleans up these problems. He never has put these guys in any form of accountability. Because I'm such a psychopathic Jet fan, I always DVR the Jet postgame show, whether I'm at the game or it's a Sunday afternoon and I'm home. I wait till all the games are over and I flip that on. And I wanted to vomit when I heard Saleh's explanation for the false start penalties, and he's bringing up the idea that, maybe it's Aaron's cadence. Maybe that's something we need to dial back a little bit. Right then and there, I'm saying to myself as I'm shaking my head, Robert Saleh, you just made the biggest mistake of your head coaching tenure. Because you started right there a war with somebody that you don't go to war with. That being the most powerful person in that organization right now, Aaron Rodgers. It is not a head coach player relationship. It is not a boss-employee relationship. No, they are co-workers. Hell, you could argue Rodgers has more power than the head coach. Rodgers calls the shots with this organization. We saw it based on his actions in the offseason. And Rodgers looked completely befuddled when he was asked during his post-game about this, saying, quote, seemed like an outlier, seemed like no reason to make changes on an outlier. Maybe we just need to hold people accountable. And that's what I'm always asking for. That's what I'm always begging for with the Jets. Some accountability. Hold people's feet to the fire. Whether it be with these penalties, you have some kind of punishment during practice to force these bad habits out of them. Or you're watching the game, Breece Hall's doing absolutely nothing. He's being shut down by the Denver Broncos defense. Whereas you're getting some production when you're putting Braylon Allen out there. And they always say that competition breeds the best out of people. You've got this other kid who's a 250-pound monster truck running right through people. Use him. And you weren't doing that. You were missing opportunity after opportunity throughout this game. Whether it be at the end of the first quarter, you get a gift given to you on the pass interference penalty by Moss that puts you in great field position. You get down to the 1 yard line, 1st and goal, and you don't come away with a touchdown. It's handoff to Hall. Handoff to Hall. Both times he's stopped. 3rd down, it's a deflected pass by John Franklin Myers. I like the fact that it seemed like they were going to go for it on 4th and goal there. But no, that ends up not happening because John Simpson gets called for a false start penalty and you have to settle for a field goal. Or how about at the end of the first half, Rodgers completes that beautiful pass to Mike Williams, gets you down into the red zone of the Broncos, and you come away with just a field goal because the offensive line has Rodgers running for his dear life. He has to run out of bounds on one play, ends up getting sacked. You lose 7 yards. It was just such a messy game for the Jets between those missed opportunities, the penalties that they're committing, including the Alan Lazard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty that I thought was a bit ticky-tack by the referees. But you would have had 1st down on the Broncos' 18-yard line. Instead, another drive, you ended up settling for a field goal. It feels like, while the Jets are 2-2 here after 1 month, it feels like there's so many more problems than a 2-2 team should really have. Whether it be the defensive line not getting any pressure on Bo Nix yesterday. And how is it that the Broncos are out blitzing the Jets in that game? How is it that they're out physicaling the Jets at the line of scrimmage? The Jets not realizing that you have a quarterback that had no way of completing passes in that first half. Bo Nix had -7 passing yards in that first half. And you hit him twice in the entire game. Not one time does your defensive line breach through and get to this kid and make him see ghosts. Not one time are you getting any form of pressure on him throughout this game. A game where he's not able to complete a forward pass to save their lives. The Broncos had one drive of significance in that game yesterday, and that was in the second half of the third quarter when Bo Nix finally found Courtland Sutton in the back of the end zone for a go-ahead touchdown. Other than that, they weren't doing anything spectacular. They weren't doing anything too impressive. You kept relying on Greg Zuerlein to make field goals for you, and you figure at some point, he's human. At some point, he is even going to miss one of these long field goal attempts that you're putting him in awkward positions. That's why a lot of people have thrown this at the feet of Zuerlein. No, this loss is not on Greg Zuerlein. He was 3 for 3 up till that point. And kicking a 50-yard field goal in those kind of conditions is a lot for anybody to ask for. This is clearly on Robert Saleh and the coaching staff. Not having a great game plan going into this game, not having the players prepared, and continuing to let these stupid penalties be your bugaboo. Let these stupid penalties be what ultimately costs you at the end of the day. And in the long term, or should I say the short term, because this is not a long-term thing when it comes to the Jets. Aaron Rodgers, you really only have him for this year and probably next year. But in that time span, we're quickly seeing that Robert Saleh's not the guy to coach this team with Aaron Rodgers as the quarterback. They win games despite Robert Saleh's coaching. You see this all throughout these games. Most other coaches would be over there talking to their players throughout the game. Saleh, unless there's a score of some significance, he completely distances himself from the players throughout the game. Most other coaches would be over there getting on their offensive linemen for all of these false start penalties. Meanwhile, he's continuously just looking down at his playbook and distancing himself from the players all throughout these games. He is not the guy to take this team where it needs to go. Nice guy, seems like the kind of guy you want to have a beer with, and was a very good defensive coordinator. But we're seeing, as we go along here, the warts of Robert Saleh as a head coach amplified, and amplified even more now that you have a Hall of Fame level quarterback part of your team, that you made the biggest mistake probably of your coaching career, starting a possible war with him yesterday when, let's face it, he already didn't love you to begin with. Got a lot left to talk about today. Give you some thoughts on the baseball playoffs coming up, including a messy situation that MLB created last week that they're continuing to have to deal with today. So give you some thoughts on that. Some thoughts on the trade that the Knicks are looking like they're on the verge of completing, mixing some more football along the way. So a lot to get to over the next about 40, 45 minutes here. Glad you guys could join me this week. And as I tell you each and every single week at this time, please sit back, relax, help put your feet up, and continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
Well, we're finally at one of my favorite points in the sports calendar, and that being the beginning of the MLB postseason. Or at least you would think it's the beginning of the MLB postseason. Technically, we've still got some business to finish here as far as the regular season is concerned, because MLB clearly had their heads up their asses last week and were not prepared for this hurricane down in the Gulf Coast, Hurricane Helene, I believe it's called, not realizing that they weren't going to be able to complete that Braves-Mets series in Atlanta last week, and not having any backup plans in place. Not having any plans, realizing that, hey, the Marlins are on the road, or the Tampa Rays are on the road. We can put them there, or put the games somewhere where you can complete this in the right amount of time without affecting the postseason. Their excuse was, we didn't want to take away the gate from the Atlanta Braves. It's very simple. All of the money made off of those games, have it go to the Atlanta Braves. Whether you played them in Chicago, you played it down in Miami at the Marlins Stadium, which has a dome, what a novel concept. A team down south with a dome, something that they should have thought of before they opened that new stadium down in Atlanta, considering that is a place that can deal with a lot of rainouts or rain delays at times. You've put both of these teams, quite frankly, in such a detriment, such a spot where now, no matter who wins what today, and the scenario for those of you who don't know, the winner of game 1 is in the postseason. Then you play game 2 about a half hour after that game is done. And if the winner of game 1 wins game 2 as well, then only that team qualifies for the postseason. The other team's out, and the Arizona Diamondbacks are in. But if the Mets and Braves split these two games, they're both in the playoffs, and the Diamondbacks are out, as the Mets and Braves have tiebreakers over both of these teams. But both of these teams, you look at them, they're kind of dead men walking coming into this situation. Because now both teams are going to be using pitchers that they would have hoped to save for the wild card round. You've got the Braves using Schwellenbachel in the first game, Chris Sale set to go in the second game, and the Mets have Luis Severino lined up for the second game with having to use Tyler McGill in the first. And it's not like they're pushing the playoffs back, folks. The wild card round begins for all of these teams tomorrow. So if the Mets qualify for the playoffs, they'll be getting on a plane and heading right back to Milwaukee. Unless they sweep these two games, then they will eliminate the Braves from the playoffs. They'll have to get on a plane and go to San Diego, and the Diamondbacks will be heading to Milwaukee. Same goes if the Braves sweep the Mets. Braves go to San Diego, and the Diamondbacks go to Milwaukee to play the Brewers. But if these two teams split, the Mets are going back to Milwaukee. And you look, someone's going to have to start a starter on 3 days rest, because the Mets used Peterson this weekend. They used Quintana and Manaea this weekend. You don't have Kodai Senga and Severino starting today. Your rotation is kind of up in the air, kind of in a perilous spot here, a spot that former Yankee manager Joe Girardi would have referred to in the past as not what you want. And it's not what anyone wanted. It's not what Major League Baseball would have wanted in this spot. It's not what any fans would have wanted, because if you're a Met fan, there's no way you could tell me that you're 100% positive vibes today, especially when you consider Atlanta has been a house of horrors for you over the years. Think back to 2022, when you had control of the National League East heading into the final weekend of the season. You go in there and get swept and have to settle for playing in the wild card round, where you got knocked off by the San Diego Padres. And there's so many instances over time where this Atlanta Braves team has ripped your heart out and emotionally broken you. That's why if the Mets are going to get this done and clinch a playoff spot, I think they gotta win game 1. If you lose game 1, even though you got Tyler McGill on the mound for this game, if you lose game 1, then all of those demons, all of those bad thoughts creep over your team once again. Brandon Nimmo and Pete Alonso can say all they want that 2 years ago was a learning experience for them, and they're more mentally tough now than they were then. But until you do it, no one's going to believe you can. It's like the Red Sox of 20 years ago. They could never beat the Yankees. And until they did it in that 04 ALCS, no one was a believer in that group. No one was saying that this group could achieve great things. So they've got to go out there and prove it. And I said a few minutes ago, I'll say it again. Even if the Mets get through this, I don't like their chances in this first round. Not just because they just lost 2 out of 3 to the Brewers over the weekend, but their pitching is in such a disarray now because of this scenario here, where you're going to have to go to guys on short rests, a bullpen that could be taxed depending on how today goes, especially if McGill and Severino don't go deep into these starts. I'm not feeling great as far as the long-term projection for this Mets team this year. As far as how I think this is going to turn out, and hey, I could look like a total fool when I post this podcast on social media on either Tuesday morning or Tuesday afternoon. I find it hard to believe one of these two teams is going to completely sweep the other. I think in the most likely outcome, you're going to see these two teams split these two games against each other. Both teams go to the postseason, with the Mets going back to Milwaukee to play the Milwaukee Brewers, and the Braves getting on a plane and heading out to the West Coast to play the San Diego Padres. The Diamondbacks really got no kick coming here. They got nothing to complain about if the winner of Game 1 just decides to ease by and chill in Game 2 and not even put up a fight. Because you look like one of the hottest teams in baseball in August, and you were barely a 500 ball club in September. I think they went 12-13. You had a chance to lock this up a long time ago. The Padres, they handled their business. Meanwhile, you guys started to fade away. So if you don't make the playoffs today, you got no one to blame but yourselves. And as far as the postseason goes for the Yankees, that will get going later this week, as they were able to clinch the 1 seed in the AL playoffs. And a lot of people are going to make a big deal about it. The fact that they lost 2 out of 3 to the Orioles and the Pirates. Yeah, the Orioles, that is a demon they've got to overcome. That's a team that has had their number so far this year, as they are only 4-9 against the Orioles. And I think in all likelihood, you're going to see the Orioles in the second round, even for as many problems as the Orioles have with their pitching staff and as many guys that they have on the IL. I just did not like the way I saw the Royals play over this final week of games. But the Yankees will get started on Saturday with Game 1 of their playoff series in the ALDS against either the Orioles or the Pirates. And it is a bit of a blow losing Anthony Rizzo to this broken finger injury now. Even though he hadn't supplied a lot of power since coming back, his defense had been on point after missing 2 months of time on the IL. But the key to this, we see these Yankee teams a lot that have these great offenses that struggle in the postseason. But I come into this postseason more so concerned with the pitching staff, because you have Garrett Cole as your ace, but then there's a lot of question marks after that with Rodon, who can be a bit of a head case at times. With Clark Schmidt and Luis Heel, you wonder, in Heel's case especially, is he going to be running up against a bit of a rookie wall here that now pitching in a month that he's never pitched in his life, is it going to start to wear on him a little bit? This offense, as long as they're healthy, and that's always a key, I think is going to be fine. We've seen Soto in the past do great things in the postseason. Giancarlo Stanton, despite his injury problems with the Yankees at times, has been a stud in the postseason for the Yankees. The key is, of course, the captain, number 99, your soon-to-be two-time AL MVP, Aaron Judge, waking up in these playoffs, because that has been the one bugaboo hanging over his career. The fact that he's around a 200 hitter in the postseason. There's no excuses anymore. There's no more, oh, Judge was the only guy in the lineup and they were pitching around Aaron Judge. No. You've got Soto. You've got Stanton. You got Jazz Chisholm. He had a remarkable rookie year from Austin Wells, despite him struggling over his last 10 to 12 games. Gleyber Torres has done a nice job in the leadoff spot. You have a lineup that is fully locked down, ready, and prepared. There's no excuses anymore for Aaron Judge. As much as I love him, this is a postseason. He needs to finally wake the hell up and get the job done.
I'll be back.
For as aggravated as I was at MetLife Stadium yesterday, watching the mess that was my New York Jets, and then the nonsense after the game with Saleh having the nerve to rip Aaron Rodgers' cadence, which still, it befuddles me that he would even go there, considering that's been one of Rodgers' greatest weapons over his damn near 20-year career. And clearly he got called to the principal's office by Aaron Rodgers today, as he seemed to backtrack on those statements. There was one thing that brought some joy to my heart, just a little bit of joy to my heart, and that was the loss by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you may say, M3, why do you care about the Pittsburgh Steelers? Why would you say that about the Steelers? They're not in your division. They're not a rival of the New York Jets. And while in the future I will struggle to rip the Steelers somewhat, because my soon-to-be brother-in-law Ryan and his family are big-time Steeler fans, so when they're not playing the Jets, I will root for them to do well. When they play the Jets, I will hope that the Jets take their foot and put it up their ass and take their fists and shove it down their throat. But then there's that Steeler fan out there that is, quite frankly, aggravating the living crap out of me. And that would, of course, be my former work son, Steven, who's in denial, should we say, Pittsburgh Steeler fan, who doesn't realize that the Steelers were not dominant on their way to 3-0. They faced a quarterback in Kirk Cousins, who was just coming off of Achilles surgery, first game in 10 months. Then they're playing the San Diego Chargers, and yes, I will still call them the San Diego Chargers, and lost not just their quarterback, Justin Herbert, due to a high ankle sprain in this game, but also lost their left tackle and took advantage of a career backup in Taylor Heineke in the second half when the game was tied at 10. He wants to sit here and talk trash like the Steelers are the most dominant thing that anybody has ever seen, when in reality, they have been the most fortunate team in the NFL so far this season. They have taken advantage of everybody else's issues, everybody else's problems. And, oh yeah, in the middle there, they faced Bo Nix in his rookie debut at home. So let's not act like you've played the likes of the Chiefs or the 49ers. Let's not act like you've had the difficulty in your schedule of having to play 3 games in a 9-day span. You've been very fortunate to be 3-0. And while you should never apologize about victories, you do have to realize that there are things that favor in your direction. Now, yesterday, the football gods were not in their favor when Anthony Richardson left the game with a right hip injury. And what happened? A demon from their past came back and haunted them once again. And that be Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco, who this time last year was on his couch, was thinking about potential retirement, and then got called off the couch by the Browns, had a solid run with them to get them into the playoffs. That earned him a second life or a third life, however many lives you think he has here in the NFL remaining. And he's the backup with the Colts now. And I wouldn't rule out that he has a good run here as their starter, because in the short amount of time that we've seen Anthony Richardson in the NFL, we have seen that he cannot stay healthy. So thank you, Indianapolis Colts. I am very thankful for you beating the Steelers yesterday, giving them their first loss. And what do you know? I didn't get any text messages or social media comments from Steven this week. I wonder why. Now, hopefully, Colts, you'll do us a solid and get your ass kicked on November 17th when you got to play the Jets on Sunday Night Football. This is not going to be an I told you so moment. This is not going to be one of those moments where I say, aha, or I was the smartest guy in the room. But it feels really good so far to be somewhat right on the Washington Commanders. Now, it's early. We've only played 4 games so far this season, with 2 games left to be played here in Week 4 on Monday Night Football. But it is remarkable what we're seeing out of this kid, Jayden Daniels, who, if you listen to this podcast, you would know he was the quarterback I was the most high on coming into the draft this past April. He was the one that I thought had the best chance of early success and was going to be the best pro overall. But I never expected him to be having record-breaking performances in his first 4 weeks on the job. You look at first quarterback in the history of this league to have 80% completion percentage in 2 consecutive games. He's the first rookie to have an 80% completion percentage over a 4-game span. Led his team to back-to-back 38-point performances. And it's their second game yesterday against the Cardinals in which they have 200 passing yards and 200 rushing yards. So it's a well-balanced attack there with this team. The best part about it is this kid is not turning over the football. He's spreading the ball around. He knows the right time when to use his arm and when to use his legs. And you seem to have a good nucleus there between him, his head coach, Dan Quinn, and the offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury. They have an opportunity in front of them. Yes, it's very early in the season. But you have an opportunity in front of you to really take advantage of the NFC East. Because you look at them right now. The Giants just stink. And now they may be without Malik Neighbors for at least their next game. Who knows how long he's going to be out with the concussion. And they got to go to Seattle, which has been a bad place for them over the years. The Cowboys did not look impressive at all in their victory over the Giants on Thursday night. And now are going to be without both of their edge rushers in DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons for at least the next couple of weeks. In the case of DeMarcus Lawrence, it sounds like he could be out until mid-November. And then there's the Eagles. The Eagles who you wonder if there's an adult in the room, if there's someone that can really run things with this franchise, or are they just a total train wreck waiting to happen? The funny thing is they're 2-2, whereas a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars are 0-4 and leave you head scratching. And you feel worse about the Eagles situation than you do with the Jaguars situation because expectations were higher. They're coming off of a year where they fell apart in the second half of the season, got destroyed by the Buccaneers in the first round of the postseason, and add on top of it, now you've got both of your top wide receivers out with injuries. You've got this back and forth between the head coach and the quarterback where you're not really sure who's in charge of things there. Their defense is not creating a lot of pressure at all. And we knew that the linebacker position was going to be a problem with the Eagles. But this front four, you figured, was going to be stout enough to cover up any of those issues. And so far, that has not been the case. Now, I don't want to sit here and completely take any credit away from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because the Buccaneers have been, along with the Commanders, another one of my favorite stories so far on the NFC side of things to start this season. Especially showing that last year was no fluke by Baker Mayfield, that he, in the right scenario, is a good quarterback that you can win with. Now, there was going to be a lot of pressure on him going into this game after his comments last week directed at Tom Brady when he said on a podcast, saying, quote, "The building was a little bit different with Tom in there. Obviously, playing wise, Tom is different. He had everyone dialed in, high-strung environment, so I think everyone was pretty stressed out. They wanted me to come in, be myself, bring the joy back to football for guys who weren't having as much fun." And ironically, Tom was covering that game for Fox this week and fired back at him. So you're going to fire at the GOAT like that, you better be impressive in front of him. You better not throw up all over yourself. And he had another big performance. Between the Buccaneers, the Commanders, and the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings, who I'm incredibly happy for Sam Darnold, that he's getting a full-on opportunity here, that he's getting a chance to show what he's really made of. Yes, it got a little bit hairy there in the second half for the Packers, and I'm not going to make too big a deal of that loss for the Packers because Jordan Love had missed, about 3 weeks of game action. We didn't even know he was going to play until Saturday. And the Vikings were able to take advantage of some of his early problems, early interceptions, and build themselves enough of a lead that it was almost insurmountable for the Packers to come back from. And the Packers did themselves no favors in that first half. When you look at their first several drives of the game, whether it be with the interceptions by Jordan Love or by all of the fumbles that the Packers were dealing with here, as well as with some of these missed field goals that they have. In fact, you look at the Packers' first 5 drives of this game. Missed field goal, interception, missed field goal, interception, turnover on downs. You keep giving the Vikings, with the weapons that they have, those kind of opportunities for short field, they're going to keep taking advantage of it. Doesn't take away from what I think Love and the Packers can accomplish this year, but we got to give some praise to Darnold and the Vikings, especially Sam Darnold, who had been treated like a lot of people's doormat when he was with the Jets and how things ended there and his 1 year with the Carolina Panthers. I think the best thing that happened for this kid in the long run is him going to the 49ers, sitting there as the backup for a year with Kyle Shanahan as his head coach. He got to just take a step back, take a deep breath, and learn how NFL football should really be played. And then he went to a head coach in Kevin O'Connell, who wasn't just trying to squeeze him into his scheme. No, he built the scheme around Sam's strengths, built the scheme around what Sam is good at, and emphasized those points. And on top of that, you've got a defensive coordinator in Brian Flores who's got his defense pinning their ears back. This is a dangerous squad. This is a team that is a lot more dangerous than we thought coming into the year, and a team that I'm not looking forward to seeing my Jets play this coming Sunday. But it's early in this season. It's still too early to really make any definitive statements about any teams, unless you're dealing with some significant injuries, whether it be the Eagles with the losing wide receivers, the Cowboys dealing with injuries on their defensive line with their 2 top edge rushers, or the Chiefs now losing another weapon yesterday in the weirdest way possible, with Patrick Mahomes falling into Rashid Rice's knee and it looked like he has torn his ACL and going to be done for the year. Now they're without him, Hollywood Brown, and Isaiah Pacheco. But they've built themselves enough of a cushion there at 4-0 that they could survive it. It's too early, I think, still, unless a team is 0-4 or 1-3, to truly make a definitive statement on who's really good, who's a Super Bowl contender, and who's a pretender. Unless you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I think we all thought were frauds to begin with.
I'll be back.
All right, only a few more minutes left here, but a couple more things I wanted to get to. And this first one is, I think, a little bit problematic for college football. And I'm starting to understand why some of these coaches, like Nick Saban, like Dabo Swinney, amongst others, were so concerned about the NIL deals and the transfer portal, because it almost in a way acts like free agency for college football. In a way, it treats things like the wild, wild west. And while I've always been in favor of the players making money off the field for their name, likeness, image. I don't think it should just be the schools that are benefiting that. I've also never been in favor of the players having a salary from the school, having the school financially benefit them beyond a scholarship. They shouldn't be paying them like they're an employee of the program. But that's essentially with these boosters, with all of these advertisers, that more times than not you're seeing be the lead reasons why a kid chooses a certain program have become. And we're now seeing what could be an ugly sign of things to come with what happened this past week, as UNLV has now suffered through something that I think is the fear of all of these programs, with a player who does not get the financial benefits that they thought that they were promised to them or that they desired, and they decide to pull out of the school. That being the quarterback of UNLV, Matthew Sluka, as he announced the last Tuesday on social media that he is going to be using his redshirt year to not play any more games for the Rebels this year. And as we would come to find out, while he didn't give any reasons at the time, you start to hear leaks from Sluka's father and agent that he was allegedly verbally promised $100,000 by UNLV offensive coordinator Brandon Moran during his recruitment, but only received $3,000 from the school's NIL collective. The school would put out a statement. The head coach would put out a statement. This is just an awful look for college football, especially when you're seeing a kid do this in what could have been his final year in college, because he spent 4 years playing for Holy Cross in the FCS before transferring to UNLV this past off season. And now you have him doing this at a time in which his team is 4-0. His team is now in the top 25 in the country, and he's pulling out. He's saying, nah, I didn't get what I want financially. I'm out of here, guys. This is why these coaches were afraid of this to begin with. And while I was against some of the statements by the likes of Saban and others criticizing the NIL deals at first, I can understand why they had trepidation, because they're worried about those 5-star prospects that are eventually going to get their feelings hurt by not getting what they want and deciding to pull out. You're seeing this for a place like UNLV that, with all due respect, is not a hot spot for college football. But who's to say that a place like Alabama or a place like Clemson or Georgia or Ohio State, Michigan, one of the big boys in it all, Notre Dame, who's to say that they're not the next ones to have to deal with nonsense like this and possibly being extremely detrimental to their program and their chances of being a playoff team? Because you never know. If UNLV had Sluka still with their schedule, they go undefeated, maybe they're one of those teams that could have snuck in to the college football playoff. We'll never know now because of him feeling that he isn't getting what he was promised. This kind of came out of nowhere. This was something that I didn't see coming or didn't even hear rumblings about, but Shams was the first one to break the news on this late Friday night, as the Knicks, it sounds like, are getting closer and closer to a trade for Karl-Anthony Towns, one of the best big men in the league, who's only 28 years old, a multi-time All-Star, a two-time All-NBA selection, has been an awesome player for the Minnesota Timberwolves so far in his career. Sounds like he's on his way to the Big Apple to play for the Knicks in a deal for Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, the top 13 protected first-round pick that the Knicks got from the Pistons for next year's draft, in a trade that will somehow, some way also include the Charlotte Hornets receiving draft compensation for them using their salary cap exceptions to help the Knicks and the Timberwolves make this deal work out. And on the surface, I know there are Knicks fans out there that are not going to like this, but this deal is so incredibly smart for so many reasons. Because as of right now, let's face it, you did not have a true center on the Knicks. I like Mitchell Robinson as a player, what he brings defensively for the Knicks, but he's always getting hurt. And he's no real threat offensively for them. Now with this latest injury that he's dealing with after his offseason ankle surgery, he's likely going to be out until the start of the new year. And with how brittle he is, you bring in Towns, you put Mitchell Robinson to the bench, and you have your backup four. You have your backup big man there because you really didn't have a backup center. Your only real backup big was Precious Achiuwa. Or if you were going to be going with a small starting lineup, you were going to have Julius Randle at the 5. And as bulky as he is, I don't think that's something that you really wanted to put on him, the wear and tear of being your 5 for the entirety of the game. In certain lineups, you could have done that, but I don't think it long-term would have worked out. There's a lot of people out there I see crying and complaining about, oh, but what about the Nova 4? You're breaking up this group. You just got Mikal Bridges in here, and now you're trading Dante. Get the hell off. Yeah, you're losing a three-point shooter. He had a career breakout year, making the most threes in the entirety of his career. But Dante DiVincenzo is a very movable part. And you weren't going to have many times with that group on the court together anyway. Mikal Bridges and Jalen Brunson were the only two of those guys that were guaranteed to be in your starting lineup. The likes of Hart and DiVincenzo were going to be coming off the bench, and the only time those four potentially were going to play together is if the other team was playing a small lineup somewhere in like the later stages of the second quarter or the middle of the third. You were going to be starting those 5 guys together. Dante DiVincenzo only started last year because the Knicks had so many injuries throughout the year. Remember, they lost Randle from January on. You had a lot of time where OG Anunoby was missing time due to injury. So that's where Dante DiVincenzo stepped in and kept this team afloat. But with those guys still here, you weren't going to have them all on the court together, because what were you going to do? Bench OG Anunoby for one of these two guys being in the starting lineup? I know people want to create these narratives, want to create these themes, but come on. The Knicks are a much better team today because you're getting a 28-year-old all-star player who clearly wasn't a fit with the Timberwolves anymore because he's much better at the 4 than he is at the 5. He could stretch the floor a little bit with his ability to shoot threes, as he's a 41% three-point shooter last year for the Timberwolves. But with Rudy Gobert there, those two kind of got in the way of each other, and it was time for one of them to go, and no one was going to take on the Rudy Gobert contract. Plus, you're getting him at a time where he's at the start of a 4-year Supermax deal. So you've got him under contract for the next 4 years. You just signed Brunson to a new deal. You've re-signed OG Anunoby. At some point, you'll probably come to terms on some kind of deal for Mikal Bridges and keep him in place here. The Knicks have all of the pieces now with this group, as long as this trade goes through, to be that threat to the Boston Celtics for the Eastern Conference Finals and winning a championship. More so than the Philadelphia 76ers. I mentioned it last week. We still haven't seen the Sixers get to even a conference finals with Joel Embiid. He needs to prove he can get through a full season without any injuries. So does Paul George. And they're very much a top-heavy team. This Knicks team, I think, has a lot more depth to it now, because now you push Josh Hart to the bench. You push Mitchell Robinson to the bench. And you could use Precious Achiuwa at the 4, where he's more suitable in this Knicks lineup. All the way around, I like this trade for this Knicks team. I like the trade on the Timberwolves side of things as well, because you unclog the jam there that you got with the two big men in Gobert and Towns. And in the case of trading Julius Randle, many Knick fans were always fearful of how Randle was going to fit in this offense, with it now truly being Jalen Brunson's team anyway. So I don't know how, if you're a Knick fan, you couldn't be doing cartwheels today, because every move that this team has made in the last couple of years has turned to gold. This front office, this regime, has set you up for the best possible chance at success. Now, it's just about going out there and accomplishing this and winning the Knicks' first championship in over 50 years. And that, my friends, was Keeping It Sports with M3 for Monday, September 30th, 2024. Everyone, please have a great night. Have a fun, safe, happy, healthy week. You got one life, people, so you might as well try to live it up. And I'll talk to you guys again, same time, next week. Until then, peace.
We have to go. Good night, everybody.
I have had enough of you!
Thank you for all the fun. Thank you. Hey, shut up, will ya?
I don't want to see you, I don't want to hear you, I don't want to smell you. Now leave. I'll be back.